In July of 1890, a reviewer for the Scots Observer warned his readers that Oscar Wilde's newest story was false art, full of unnatural iniquity, and fit only for outlawed noblemen. The outrage was directed at a terrifyingly simple premise. A beautiful young man makes a dark bargain to stay forever youthful, while a hidden portrait absorbs the physical decay of his aging and the ugly toll of his mounting sins. To understand the hostility of the press, we have to look at the London of the 1890s. Late Victorian England demanded an intense public display of moral purity. Meanwhile, its elite class spent a great deal of energy hiding behind those exact same moral codes to conceal their private vices. Oscar Wilde knew exactly the kind of society he lived in, and he wrote a story to hold a mirror directly up to it. The Picture of Dorian Gray was a deliberate challenge to the strict, performative ethics of his peers. By putting the hidden, scandalous lives of the elite into print, Wilde offended the reading public. More critically, he painted a target on his own back, forging the exact weapon his enemies would eventually use to destroy him. Wilde later confessed that he had actually written himself into the novel, splintering his own identity across the story's three central figures. Lord Henry Wotton is who the public thought Wilde was, a witty provocateur preaching aestheticism, the controversial belief that art and beauty exist for their own sake and have no obligation to teach a moral lesson. Dorian Gray, the eternal youth, represented who Wilde wished he could be, a man living freely and indulging his most secret desires without ever facing a consequence. But the tragic painter, Basil Hallward, is who Wilde said he actually was in reality. He is an artist whose fatal flaw is putting too much of his own secret soul into the work he shows the world. When the manuscript arrived at Lippincott's magazine, the editor panicked. Fearing a scandal, he deleted roughly 500 words. He specifically targeted queer-coded language, scrubbing away passages where the painter Basil confesses his literal worship of Dorian. Even with the most blatant passages cut, the core truth of the story remained. Wilde's radical vision of art was now on a collision course with Victorian criminal law. When the magazine hit the stands, reviewers were furious. Wilde fired back in a series of letters to editors like W.E. Henley, stubbornly defending the ethical beauty of his story and insisting that an artist's only duty is to art itself. Yet as he fought these public battles, the carefully maintained facade of his personal life started to fracture, mimicking the very decay of his fictional painting. He entered into a relationship with Lord Alfred Douglas, an aristocrat 16 years his junior. Their private dynamic mirrored the exact taboo themes that had so horrified the critics of his book. This relationship caught the attention of Douglas's enraged father, the Marquess of Queensberry. He decided to expose Wilde, leaving a calling card at his London club that publicly accused him of sodomy. In response, Wilde made a catastrophic miscalculation. He sued Queensberry for libel. Under the law at the time, the only way Queensberry could avoid a conviction was to prove in open court that his allegations of Wilde's homosexuality were completely true. The man who wrote that a work of art could never be judged on moral grounds had just forced the British legal system to put his private life on trial. In the courtroom, the defense built their case by reading passages from the Picture of Dorian Gray directly into the record. They weaponized the characters, the themes, and the dialogue as literal evidence of Wilde's guilt. Faced with his own words being used against him, Wilde abruptly dropped the libel suit. The Crown immediately stepped in, arresting and trying him for gross indecency. He was convicted and handed the maximum sentence, 2 years of hard labor in solitary confinement, a brutal punishment that permanently shattered his physical health. In his novel, Dorian Gray takes a knife to his painting to erase the evidence of his sins, only to fall dead on the floor. In reality, society took a knife to Wilde's art, but it was the artist who bled. Released from prison, Wilde fled to France. He lived out his days in exile and died of meningitis in a Paris hotel at the age of 46, completely destitute. Yet, while the fictional Dorian died withered and despised, the book lived on. The 1891 novel, along with the fully uncensored manuscript published over a century later, survived the moral panic of the Victorian era to become a celebrated masterpiece. The 1890 critics were certain they were reading an immoral book. But as Wilde's legacy proves, the books the world calls immoral are simply the ones that show the world its own shame.